firstly like to acknowledge the traditional custodians on the lands in which we're meeting today and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people who are with us today. I'd like to extend a warm welcome to Naomi Lawrance, who's an accredited practicing dietitian. Naomi is accredited and she works for Oncore Nutrition. She's highly experienced in supporting those touched by cancer and has spent many years working at the Peter MacCallum Cancer Centre, as well as providing private oncology care. Naomi understands the complex and evolving needs of those living with cancer through all their stages. And Naomi is experienced in supporting people with gastrointestinal disorders, including PEI, pancreatitis, IBS, IBD, functional gut disorders, and needs related to surgery. Her approach to nutrition is holistic, individualised, and evidence-based. In the chat, I'll just pop in some information, some links regarding her practice, but otherwise over to you, Naomi.
Fantastic. Thanks, Tiffany, and thanks to Pancare for having me here today. Really glad to be here with you all this morning live. And one of the beauties of being here live is that I can respond to your questions. So please feel free to pop your questions in the chat function, as Tiffany said, and make sure we have lots of time to get to those towards the end of the presentation. So I shall share my screen and we'll get going. Wonderful. Everyone can see and hear that. Great. Fantastic. So before we get started this morning, I would love to know a little bit about what best describes you and what brings you here today. So if I may ask you to, in the chat function, put the either the number or the words for what brings you here today. Is it a diagnosis of esophageal cancer, gastric, pancreatic, liver, a gallbladder or bile duct, stromal tumour, a GIST, a NET? Are you a health professional, or is there another reason? Or perhaps are you the carer of someone with one of those diagnoses? So I will just give you all a minute or so to pop those numbers in, and we'll see what we've got, and it will certainly help me tailor the content and make it most meaningful to you all here today. Okay, fantastic. So actually the majority of the people we've got here are pancreatic, stomach and esophageal. Okay, great. Thanks everyone who's been happy to share here, and certainly I should have mentioned it's not compulsory. If you don't feel comfortable sharing, that's more than okay. All right, great. Wonderful. Thanks, everyone. Okay, so what we'll cover today is we'll talk about nutrition and the upper gastrointestinal tract. So what we're referring to when we're talking about the upper gastrointestinal tract, and what do the different parts of the digestive system, what role do they play in our digestion? We'll talk specifically to the nutrition challenges of upper GI cancer and different treatments. We'll talk through managing a lot of the symptoms and side effects that occur with upper GI cancers and the treatments. We'll talk through digestion, absorption, weight changes, managing energy levels, talk through some practical tips about how to build out meals and snacks, and I'll talk about some alternative diets and complementary therapies and where the evidence is at and what's supported. And as I said, plenty of time to answer your questions at the end. Okay, so when we're talking about the upper GI tract, we are talking about the esophagus, also known as the food pipe, the stomach, the pancreas, the gallbladder, bile ducts, the liver, and usually the first part of the small bowel, which is called the duodenum. So the digestive tract obviously has a really, really important role in our overall health and well-being. And each different part of the digestive tract has a very important role and unique role in how we digest and absorb food, but also in hormonal regulation and detoxification processes in the body as well. So the food pipe, also known as the esophagus, is the passageway for food to get from the mouth to the stomach. And often if there's a malignancy or you've had some treatment targeting the esophagus, it can become very difficult to swallow or painful, either because of there's a narrowing or restriction or some inflammation or damage to the esophagus. Surgery for esophageal cancer can involve resecting part or all of the esophagus. And when that happens, the stomach is pulled up and joined to a higher part of the esophagus. And so the stomach goes from being more like a bag to a long sock. And that can have big impacts to our overall stomach capacity. Which can bring to difficulty with things like reflux, feeling full quickly, and managing larger amounts of foods. And sometimes after the esophagectomy, need to opt for more soft, moist or pureed foods for a while to be very gentle on the esophagus and help food get down. At the lower end of the esophagus, there is a valve or a sphincter between the esophagus and the stomach, which is called the gastroesophageal sphincter. And its role is to prevent the backflow of the food and fluid in your stomach into the esophagus. And the esophagus isn't protected by the same lining of the stomach. So if gastric contents backflows into the esophagus, this is what causes the reflux and can cause irritation of the esophagus. And this can become quite common after stomach, esophageal, and even some pancreatic surgeries. And so we'll talk through lots of ways that we can help manage reflux if that's an issue for you. Stents and dilatations are also often used to help open up the passageway of the esophagus if needed. So stents are using some sort of mesh material that sits in the esophagus and holds it open, or dilatations is essentially stretching the constricted part of the esophagus to help food and fluid move through with more ease. So then we come to the stomach, which is has a few different purposes in digestion. It plays a big role in the chemical breakdown of the food that we're eating via enzymes that are produced by the stomach, and the gastric acid itself starts to help cleave up and break down our food. There's also a role in the mechanical digestion and churning of the food, which helps break down larger particles and also mix the food with the gastric juices and enzymes. We do absorb some elements of what we eat and drink in the stomach. So we can absorb some fluid, some medications. Alcohol and caffeine can easily move through the stomach wall, and some proteins and vitamins that don't require the complex digestion processes can also move through the stomach wall. In the context of having a gastric cancer, surgeries can be used, either partial or total, so part of the stomach or all of the stomach can be removed. And it's common after having part of that stomach removed or all of the stomach removed, as you can imagine, is that you have less tolerance for large volumes of food, because essentially your holding bay has been taken away. So you can experience feeling full really quickly, and you can also lose some appetite because there's sort of some mechanisms within the stomach which can help us feel hungry. People can experience some nausea and reflux as well. Dumping syndrome is something that's common after a gastrectomy, and it's related to the food and fluid moving really more quickly into the first part of the small bowel, the duodenum. And because it's missed sort of the process that happens in the stomach, it can feel quite uncomfortable in the small bowel. Highly recommend, if you're planned for any type of esophageal, stomach, or even pancreatic cancer, is ask your medical team, your surgeon, if you're a risk for dumping syndrome, and if so, certainly talking to a dietitian about that and how to manage it. It's certainly avoidable. If the stomach is removed, there are certain vitamins and minerals that you can become at higher risk of not absorbing enough of. So specifically things like vitamin B12, your fat-soluble vitamins, A, D, E, and K, folic acid, iron, and calcium. So after such a surgery, working with a dietitian to ensure that you're getting enough through diet and supplementing if needed, and being linked in with ongoing care to review those frequently is really important. Okay, the liver. So the liver is quite a phenomenal organ, and sort of call it an accessory organ to the digestive system because it drains into the digestive system. It's got a really big role in not only the digestion of the food that we're having via the bile. So the liver produces bile, which is excreted into the first part of the small bowel, which further helps to break down food for its absorption. But it also is the sort of the processing and clearing house for all of the nutrients once they are absorbed. So once everything's absorbed through the stomach and through the intestines, all of that blood, its first stop is the liver, and the liver essentially sort of changes the molecules and shoots them off into the body, or stores them. So the other role for the liver is really in the metabolization or breakdown of things that we want to get rid of in the body, so particularly medications, and any damage to the liver will impede obviously the roles of the liver to be able to do that. So we want to make sure we're supporting the liver function and health very well. Okay. And we also have the pancreas. So the pancreas has a very important role in digestion and also in blood glucose control. So the pancreas produces the enzymes, which are really important for digesting and absorbing the food we eat. And so it's the head of the pancreas, or sort of the thicker end of the pancreas, that snugs into where the stomach and the small bowel is, which is the area where the enzymes are produced, and they're released into the first part of the small bowel after the stomach. And the tail of the pancreas is where specific hormones, insulin and glucagon, are produced and released into the bloodstream, and they're really important for controlling our blood sugar levels. So insulin for getting glucose into the cells where it's used for energy, and glucagon for producing new blood glucose when we need it when it's low. So I'll talk a bit more specifically to the role of the pancreatic enzymes in digestion, because I think they're really important, really relevant for many of you here today. So the pancreas produces 3 different enzymes: proteases, which break down protein, lipase, which breaks down fat, and amylase, which breaks down more complex carbohydrates. And the way I like to think about or picture the pancreatic enzymes are like scissors or cleavers. So when we eat foods, we're eating quite complex, long chains of these nutrients. But we can only absorb through our intestinal wall small parts of that chain. And so what the enzymes do is they go along and cleave the links of those chains into the smaller amount. And if that's all humming along really nicely and we've got a well-functioning pancreas and enough digestive enzymes to deal with the meals and the foods that we're eating, then we absorb the nutrients, not only the macronutrients, the proteins, fats, and carbohydrates, but we're also therefore more likely to be absorbing the minerals and the fats, particularly the fat-soluble vitamins that sort of piggyback along the uptake with the fats, proteins, etc. And so what we can expect if the system's working really well is that our weight's stable, our muscle mass is stable, we're feeling strong, we're feeling energetic, that we've got very regular bowel motions that are formed, and with that we're not experiencing any vitamin or mineral deficiencies that don't seem to make sense based on what we're eating. On the counter, if your digestive enzymes, if your pancreas isn't able to make enough of the digestive enzymes to support your digestion, or perhaps you've had part or all of the pancreas removed, then you may need some support with enzyme supplementation, which I'll talk about in time to come. Often when we don't have enough of the enzymes breaking down our foods and those longer chains are passing through, what people can experience is really pale, foul-smelling, oiling or floating loose bowels, so diarrhea, so more frequent, more urgent. Sometimes, but not always, it's associated with quite a bit of discomfort sort of after eating and digestion. Those symptoms can be related to many other things as well. Sometimes you can experience weight loss if the food you're eating is actually not able to get into the system, passing through into the toilet. And not only sort of weight loss, but the vitamin and mineral deficiencies, you can often feel really tired and weak. So if this is you, absolutely something to bring up with your doctors and perhaps seek a referral to a dietitian. So, as I mentioned, the other role of the pancreas is in blood glucose control. Again, if the pancreas is not able to do its job sufficiently, we can use medication to support its role. So we can give insulin. And signs of really low blood sugar levels. So perhaps you're eating and drinking well, but your pancreas isn't able to I'll rephrase this. So if you've got really high blood sugar levels, it might be that you're eating and drinking really well, but the pancreas isn't able to produce the insulin that helps get that energy into the cells. So you can actually experience like headaches, tiredness, have difficulty concentrating. You can experience weight loss because the energy is not getting into the cells where it needs to be used, and have blurry vision and urinate a lot because the body's trying to get rid of those high blood sugar levels. If you've got low blood sugar levels, you might experience symptoms like shakiness and nervousness, feeling dizzy or lightheaded, or quite a fast heart rate. So things to be aware of and mention to your team there. So not only can the cancer themselves and the different parts of the digestive system obviously have a big impact on how we digest and absorb and eat, but then the treatments that are used to treat and manage the cancers can sort of elicit their own challenges on the digestive system as well. So radiation, surgery and chemotherapies very often used in the management of pancreatic cancer, and more the targeted therapies like biological agents and immunotherapies as well. So we'll talk through the side effects and how we manage those. But firstly, again, would love to put a poll out to all of you and get some feedback on what treatments you have either received or plan to receive. And you could certainly list a few, or you can pop in the numbers or the words, whatever feels best to you, and absolutely no pressure on sharing if you're not comfortable to. Okay. Okay, great. Okay, fine. Okay. All right, so we've actually got a really widespread across the board here. So I think we've got nearly everyone who all types of surgeries, chemoradiotherapies, immunotherapies, and yeah, sorry to hear of the challenges some of you are experiencing there as well. So thanks very much for giving that feedback. Okay, so in the case of surgery, I'll speak through some of the most common surgeries, and the esophagectomy I mentioned, part or all of the esophagus is removed. The stomach is stretched up to meet the top part of the esophagus, so it becomes longer and more narrow. Reflux, feeling full, nausea and vomiting can be very common. The stent or dilatations are very common. The partial or total gastrectomy, so partial or all of the stomach removed, and the partial or total pancreatectomy, so part or all of the pancreas being removed, or for pancreatic cancer, or many of you might be aware of or have had the procedure known as the Whipple's procedure. So if you would like further information about nutrition management after some of these specific surgeries related to your cancer, or surgeries more generally, I really encourage you. We've got some guides available on our website, on our online store, and they're available for you all for free. And so I really encourage you to jump on there and download the guides, because they're a nice sort of summary and repetition of what we'll be talking about today that you can have with you. So you can take a photo or a screenshot of this slide here. Use the code PANCARE2024 with a capital P in the discount code section when you go to the checkout on the online store to download those for free. And we've got others more available for free for you as well. So chemotherapy is often used either in an attempt to shrink the cancer, to make surgery a viable option, or to help manage and control the spread of the symptoms associated with the cancers. It works very differently, obviously, to surgery in that you're having a treatment that's circulating through the whole of the body. And so the chemotherapy specifically targets rapidly dividing cells in the body, as cancers are generally rapidly dividing. Unfortunately, it doesn't discriminate between cancer cells and healthy cells that are naturally rapidly dividing. So many of the side effects that are caused by chemotherapy are due to an impact on the rapidly dividing cells. And really common side effects include things like nausea and vomiting. Historically, in more maybe like Paleolithic or hunter-gatherer days, if the body perceived that there was some sort of toxin in the blood, the most likely way that it entered the body was through the digestive system. And so it's a natural response for the body trying to rid itself of what it perceives as something poisonous that's been eaten, which is why nausea and vomiting is really common. Luckily, the medical management of nausea is very, very good. And it shouldn't be expected that you just put up with feeling nauseous or vomiting or, even mildly queasy where you feel off smells and off foods. And I think it's a really, really important thing that you're communicating with your team and making sure that your nausea management is optimized with medications, because it can just have such a huge impact on what you feel like eating and how much you feel like eating. Taste changes can be really common, as can mouth ulcers. So all of the cells that line the digestive system from your mouth right through to your anus are rapidly dividing and turning over. So diarrhea can also occur if there's inflammation in the small bowel or the large bowel. Taste changes are common with chemotherapy because the taste buds are damaged, and they generally renew themselves every 4 weeks. So once the chemotherapy is out of your system and you've had time to heal and recover, that should improve and come back. It's important to consider other supplements that you might be taking if you're on chemotherapies and radiotherapy too, as they're not all appropriate or safe to be taking. So we'll speak to that as well. With radiotherapy, it's sometimes used in isolation to help shrink tumours or improve symptoms, or in combination with chemotherapy to sort of further weaken the cells and make the radiotherapy more effective. And the side effects of radiotherapy itself, unlike chemotherapy, are very specific to where in the body is being targeted. So it is recommended that anyone who's receiving radiotherapy to anywhere in the digestive system, that they do seek the advice of a dietitian, ideally before you start treatment, to talk about what the potential impacts and needs and dietary modifications may be there. So if there's part of your esophagus that's involved in the radiotherapy field, it can become irritated, and so avoiding foods that can cause further irritation or trauma to that site is really important. Nausea and vomiting can occur if there's radiotherapy to places like the stomach or pancreas particularly, but of course anywhere that you're receiving radiation. Fatigue and changes to the enzyme or hormonal control, and therefore the digestion and breakdown of your food is something we need to consider as well. So now to sort of jump into those side effects in a little bit more detail and talk through some of the ways that we might manage if you're experiencing those. So dry mouth can certainly occur with chemotherapies, and so there's different solutions to that. One I particularly like is the use of xylemelts, which are a medication that you put in your mouth that dissolves and actually helps stimulate your own saliva production, which is fantastic if that works and you've got some saliva glands that are still functioning. Otherwise, using things like artificial saliva gels can be great. Keeping the mouth really well hydrated and having more soft, moist foods can make it a bit easier. Taste is a really challenging one. So, and it's really no one size fits all with taste. And so a lot of trial and experimentation is usually the way to go. If you're experiencing like a metallic taste in your mouth when you're eating food, sometimes people find switching to wooden or plastic cutlery really helpful. And just keeping a really fresh mouth, so using lots of sort of mouthwashes, brushing your teeth a few times a day, staying really well hydrated is important. And if you find that things are tasting really bland and just not like they should, playing around with different flavours, perhaps you need a little bit more salt or sugar or, you know, herb or spice to actually light up the taste buds that you do have there, so that sort of more flavour is still sort of perceived as quite mild. And then playing around with textures and temperatures of foods as well, because it's not just sort of taste that gives us the sort of pleasurable eating experience. A bit of crunch is often quite nice. As I mentioned, sometimes, particularly with esophageal cancers, there can be a lot of pain on swallowing throughout things like radio and chemotherapy, or if you've got mouth ulcers as a result of chemotherapies. So working with texture modified foods and ensuring that we make those soft and moist or pureed foods very nutritionally dense and really well balanced is important. And I think, you know, absolutely, as with nausea, it shouldn't be expected that you have to endure pain. You know, we can work together with your doctor to ensure that you've got adequate pain control, particularly around your meal times, to make sure that you're able to get in enough foods and hydration. So reflux, as I said, really common result of many of the different surgeries involved in upper GI cancers, or if there's damage or irritation to the esophagus. So again, anti-reflux medication is particularly important and will go a long, long way to supporting reducing the actual irritation and pain. Sort of suppressing the underlying cause. But we can be really mindful about the types of foods we eat, so avoiding things that are acidic in nature, vinegar, high fat, and spice. Things like alcohol and caffeine can be triggers for some people as well. Thinking about the overall size of the meal you're having as well. So small and frequent is really great. And then being really mindful of your positioning and movement for, you know, 30 to 60 minutes after eating. So I often sort of say to people, like, are you sort of bending down to put things in the dishwasher or away in cupboards or drawers? Or are you, you know, sort of going and sort of just like chilling back on the couch where you're a bit hungover or lying down? All of those things can sort of put a bit of pressure on the contents of the stomach and push it up onto the esophagus. So if you're experiencing nausea and vomiting, I highly encourage you, as I said, to speak with your oncologist and your team and really try and optimise the antiemetics or anti-nausea medications that you're having. The different ones work in very different ways, and so often understanding how they work and which ones might be best suited for you is really helpful. So things like metoclopramide or the maxillonopramin, it actually works by relaxing the sphincter or the valve at the bottom of the stomach that releases food into the small bowel, and it works best if you take it 20 to 30 minutes before you want to eat. On the counter, things like your ondansetron or your Zofran, they work by actually slowing down the passage of things through your digestive tract, and they sort of have a longer acting life, and so the timing is less important in the relation to when you're eating. I think again, what people feel like eating and what their tolerance is when they're feeling nauseous varies a lot. So again, another time to really trial and play around with different things, but often avoiding hot aromatic foods. So lots of food smells, avoiding the kitchen during cooking times, choosing foods that are cold or at room temperature. And so, you know, often where our intuition or common sense usually leads us is the sort of dry, starchy, salty things, and staying really well hydrated is important. So dumping syndrome I mentioned earlier, and it's related to food hitting the small bowel a lot earlier than the small bowel is used to seeing it. And it can occur quite quickly. So early dumping syndrome usually occurs in, say, the first 15 to 60 minutes after eating. And then late dumping syndrome is anywhere from, say, 1 to 3 hours after eating. So with early dumping syndrome, you can experience things like cramping and nausea and fullness and sometimes some diarrhea. With the later dumping syndrome, it's related to your blood sugar control. So you can experience things like the palpitation, dizziness, headaches, sweating and shaking, and also sometimes diarrhea. So absolutely important, if you think you're experiencing anything like that, talk to your doctor and seek the advice of a dietitian, as we can work with the balance in your meals and the size of them, the timing to avoid it. So it's you know, really important to be mindful of what your specific challenges may be in terms of nutrient absorption and digestion. So we sort of, as I've mentioned sort of throughout the presentation, depending on where your cancer is, what surgeries or treatments you have, we will be very mindful and consider different nutrient challenges for you, and make sure that we are supporting your body and your digestive system to still be able to absorb and get everything you need, optimizing your food intake, and using supplementation where needed, if that can't be achieved through food alone. So with the bowels, it's really common to experience all sorts of changes in bowel habits, which I think, you know, for so many people, it's, you know, when you're experiencing constipation or diarrhea or fluctuations between the two, and you're used to having regular bowel habits, it's just one of those things that you say, oh, I'll never take it for granted again, because it can just have such an impact on how you're feeling and how you go about your day and the enjoyment of things. So and there's lots of things we can do through medications and foods to support regulating the bowels. So if you're experiencing diarrhea, again, always important to consider, is this diarrhea related to fat or food malabsorption? And if so, do we need to consider pancreatic enzyme replacement therapy like Creon? Sometimes diarrhea can occur with chemotherapy because of an inflammation or damage to the intestinal lining, in which case we want to be really mindful of the balance and the type of fibers we're having, and hydration and hydrating fluids. And often people experience the other end of the extreme with constipation based on different types of treatments, or sometimes the steroids that are given with chemotherapies to help suppress the side effects. So, you know, and then some later effects that can happen. Sometimes people experience sort of intolerance to certain fermentable carbohydrates and other foods based on changes to the gut microbiome, and that's certainly something that we can work with sort of down the line into the sort of survivorship and healing and repair phase. So I think that's all to mention here. Beautiful. I think the only one I haven't mentioned there is slow transit. or what we might sometimes refer to as gastroparesis. And that's really referring to things moving really slowly through the system, and that can make people feel nauseous or cause vomiting. It can also mean that you just fill up really quickly and stay full really, really quickly, and can have impacts on your bowel regularity as well. So often we're sort of utilising medications to help stimulate some movement through the bowel, but also working with foods that don't require as much sort of chemical or mechanical digestion, so that they're moving through the system naturally more quickly and reducing some of the side effects that can be experienced there. So slow transit and gastroparesis can be really common after particularly surgeries. Okay. I think it's, really important to consider the mind-gut connection, or the brain-gut axis, as we sometimes call it, which is a bidirectional sort of superhighway of information involving neurons and chemicals and hormones. And often how we're thinking, how we're feeling, what sort of state our nervous system is in can have a really profound impact on what's happening at every part of our digestive system, and sometimes can cause sort of discomfort or changes to bowel regularity in itself. So I like to work on sort of a holistic approach, and not just a narrow-minded view on the food or medications when thinking about our digestion as well. So, another poll. If you're comfortable, I would love to get an indication of where everyone's at with their body weight. So has your weight been relatively stable? Have you recently lost weight intentionally or unintentionally? Have you been gaining weight, or are you a health professional and it's not so relevant for you? Okay, great. Thanks everyone for popping in your responses here. And again, real mixed bag. So, okay, thanks everyone. Beautiful. All right, so now what I'm going to talk through is helping to ensure that you meet your nutritional requirements, looking at it from a food perspective. So what do we actually do? Weight loss is really, really common for people with an upper GI cancer, and meeting nutritional needs can be really challenging. So in order to, in ensuring that our weight actually remains stable before, during and after all types of cancer treatment, and certainly if you're living with cancer, is really, really important. And not just our overall body weight, but really making a big focus on preserving our lean body mass or our muscle mass. So this is really important for your ability to tolerate the treatments, and also, just so you're feeling physically fit and strong, and like you can do the things you want to do in life, and that you've got the energy and strength to do so. But ensuring that your weight and your lean body mass is stable helps facilitate a quick and complete recovery after treatment, so you can ensure that you're sort of well long term after your treatment. I encourage people to sort of track their weight weekly, ideally on the same day, same set of scales, as the trends are really important. There can be a lot of variance between different scales. I like to think about structuring your meals and snacks or your foods and drinks around three main components. The protein base, very, very important for your muscles and for all sorts of healing and repair processes. Good fats, for many reasons, including lots of energy, and low GI carbohydrates, again, for stable energy across the day, and also for helping to meet your overall calorific needs. So here I've got some really fantastic sources of protein. So any type of animal product will be a complete protein source and is quite easily used by the body. But of course, vegetarian sources of protein, like your soy products, tofu, legumes like chickpeas and lentils and peas, nuts and seeds, of course, have their place as well. So really great to go for a diverse source of protein sources of the ones that you like and you can tolerate is really helpful. Protein supplements can be used as well as a way that's easy and comfortable and convenient to meet protein needs where possible. And there's a huge variety on the market. So a dietitian can really help guide you as to what's the best and most appropriate for you. Then we want to make sure that we've got some sort of fat or oil. Ideally, it comes from plants, so absolutely love extra virgin olive oil, avocados, nuts and seeds, things like sunflowers and flax seeds, hemp seeds, peanuts, sesames. Using nut butters like a natural peanut butter or almond butter or many of the others available is really great if you're not tolerating sort of the hard stuff and the roughage. Coconut products, coconut cream, milk, yogurt, very good source of fat, as are things like butters. So if you require creon, the pancreatic enzyme replacement, it's really important that you're matching your creon dose, particularly to the amount of fat that you're having in a particular meal or snacks. So your creon needs to be taken correctly based on the types of nutrients you've got in your food and how much of those nutrients you've got, as well as the correct timing for it to be effective. So in order for it to really mimic what your pancreas naturally does. And so if you're feeling a bit unsure of that or feel like you need a bit of extra support, absolutely reach out. Very happy to have a talk or find a dietitian for you. So there are some foods that don't require creon. As you can remember, the pancreas produces things that break down fats, carbohydrates, and protein. It's only very simple carbohydrates or sugars, which are sort of the most basic form of carbohydrates that we don't really need creon for. So things like fruit, jelly sorbets, boiled lollies, soft drink cordial, a bit of clear soup or broth, or tea and coffee if you're only having a dash of milk in there. Otherwise, creon will be needed for you to absorb the other foods that you're having. Low GI or low glycemic or slow release carbohydrates are really, really valuable food. And we get carbohydrates from many different foods, grains and cereals, fruits and veg, cakes and lollies. But as you can probably appreciate, not all carbohydrates are equal in terms of how they impact us from a hour to hour, day to day, and how they impact us, our health in the long run. So glycemic index is a really helpful way to understand the impact of carbohydrates on us. If we have simple carbohydrates like soft drinks, ice creams, refined, flour products like white bread, white rice, etc., then we get a large spike in our blood sugar levels, and so we get sort of this short, fast release of energy followed by the sugar crash or the slump. And that, if you're already feeling tired for any different reason, that's just really going to be rubbing salt in the wounds and make you feel a lot worse. On the counter, if you're having more complex carbohydrates, whole grains, beans, legumes, vegetables, then you'll get a gradual release of the energy into the system, steady blood sugar levels, and that takes a lot of work burden off your pancreas and other digestive organs, which is really important as well. And have you feeling sort of your energy levels having been a lot more stable throughout the day. So, I think everyone's experienced the sugar high and low, as it being a beautiful big pasta lunch, and then the 3 or 4 p.m, like I could just curl up in the corner and go to sleep, or, the desserts, the Christmas lunch is a good one, where it usually happens in extremes. So what I want you to think about is, when you're planning your meals and snacks, is to think about the carbohydrate source coming from foods that are generally less processed. So any whole meal, whole grain, oats and wheat bix are great cereals, brown rice or alternative whole grains, wholemeal pasta, pulses, your vegetables, leaving things like skin and peels on when you can, and if it's appropriate for your bowel management, and avoiding, there's no nevers, absolutely there's no nevers, but avoiding sort of constantly eating things like your chips, cakes, ice creams, so on and so forth, repeatedly throughout the day. I have also made our glycemic index guide available for you all today for free with the same code, PANCARE2024. So that's got some really practical guidance on some shopping lists with low GI foods and higher GI ones to avoid. So please jump on and pop the glycemic index guide in your cart too when you go to grab your other guides, if you're interested. And so often, many people who are going through cancer treatment are told by really, really well-meaning people, nurses and doctors, just to eat whatever you feel like. And sometimes that is, reasonable. But of course, we want to make sure that it's sort of practical and most supportive of what's going to help you through treatment. And, when you're feeling like you just can barely lift your head out of the bowl, and you're told to eat whatever you feel like, you're absolutely not going to be, cooking up elaborate meals using, all your healthy ingredients and eating as you usually would throughout that time. So we need to sort of take make it sort of more practical and realistic. So here I've got some ideas on some really simple, easy go-to small meals and snacks that are high in energy, high in protein, and also include low glycemic index carbohydrates. And I think it's often a lot more realistic for people to try and break down their meals to, say, 6 to 8 smaller snacks throughout the day, rather than trying to sit down to 3 larger meals, which we may not tolerate. And fruit smoothies are a really wonderful way to get nutrition in. Often a bit easier to drink our nutrition rather than eat it. So using things like yogurts, milks, protein powders, nuts and seeds, some really, avocado, some really high energy and high protein ingredients when we're doing smoothies is really important. So there's many types of what we call oral supplement drinks available, and some are commercially made, and you probably heard of things like Sustagen or Ensure, or there's many others, or you can sort of DIY and make your own at home with some of those ingredients that I was talking about. And so, look, they've all got sort of their merit and slight differences. I think the best one for you is the one that tastes good and that you're going to drink, so the one that you enjoy. and many of the commercial ones are what we call nutritionally complete. So they've got all the vitamins and minerals added that you need, so you can essentially theoretically survive on them. So they can be a very good sort of diet supplement if you're really unable to get in enough food or fluid. If you're unable to meet your nutrition needs through eating and drinking, there are also options for the feeding via tubes in many different ways. And if this is appropriate for you, it will be discussed by a medical team, and you'll have a referral for a dietitian there. There's a really sort of great market for pre-prepared meals and convenience meals these days. I think it's come a long, long way, and there's a lot more than was previously available. So I've got a few of the names of companies that I recommend up there. We Feed You, Dinner Ladies, a lot of these are national as well. So some, but not all. So I encourage you to, if you want to screenshot or take a photo of that one and check some of those out. A lot of the time, you know, people have lots of people around them who want to be really helpful and asking for their support in making some meals or snacks is great. But I think often giving guidance about what you need and what they could make is really good, because they want to know that you're actually eating and enjoying the food that you're getting, and you don't want to end up with a freezer full of lasagnas, which can often happen. And you know, there is such thing as too much of a good thing. Okay, so the last guide I have available for you is the Optimizing Energy and Protein. And so there's an error on this slide. It is actually the same code, Handcare 2024, that will give you that one for free as well. Now, Alison, I know an hour's up. Have I got everyone's attention for a little bit more time? Sorry.
Of course.
Awesome. Cool. All right. If anyone needs to rush off, it is being recorded and will be available for you to come back to. So I'm just going to cut to the chase on talking to some alternative diets. So I really wish there was, but there is no diet that is known to reproducibly cure or prevent cancer. And so if there's any diet or program that has been promoted to you promising that it is a cure, it is not accurate. And I think it can be very misleading and dangerous, because some of these diet protocols can actually make things worse. They can be really difficult to manage with the side effects. They can damage health and be really demanding financially, socially, and mentally. So really encourage people to do their research and just, have your BS radar going and be really skeptical, and talk to your treating team and a dietitian if there's something you're considering or unsure or want more information on. So we know, eating really well and supporting your body well through treatment and afterwards is really important. There's ways of eating that can actually, we know, reduce the likeliness of recurrence, but there's absolutely no guarantees or absolutes. Complementary therapies are things that you can use alongside your treatments to support. And so ones that have quite good evidence are ginger. Ginger, the active component of ginger can help with nausea. The latest research coming out of Queensland is really showing that the sort of effective dose is such huge amounts of ginger that you sort of like have to have a ginger the active component of ginger in a supplement to sort of make it feasible. But in saying that, if you enjoy things like ginger tea, biscuits, dry ginger ale, and it's sort of just, something you can tolerate, please enjoy that. Vitamin D, so really important that you've got adequate levels of vitamin D in the body, and We will only supplement if low, so really easy thing to test for in a blood test and go from there. Probiotics are really, really popular. So, and there's mixed but emerging evidence that specific strains can be really beneficial for specific cancer types or specific impacts we want to have perhaps on gut health, etc., etc. It's really important to avoid probiotics if you're neutropenic or immunocompromised. And if you want further guidance on probiotics, very, very happy to talk to you. Antioxidants, think vitamins A, C, and E, so ACE, as well as vibrantly sort of rich in colour fruits and vegetables, and some minerals act as antioxidants as well, things like zinc, selenium, and copper. Very important to avoid supplements or really high amounts of antioxidants in the diet during radiotherapy and some specific chemotherapy medications, because the antioxidants actually sort of protect your body's cells. And so too much of them, when we're giving you treatments that we want to target cancer cells, you might reduce the effectiveness of the treatment because the antioxidants are protecting the cancer essentially, because again, they don't discriminate. And so if you want more guidance about what you can have, how much you can have, and timing around your treatments, very happy to talk. Protein powders, you've got everything from, like cow's milk WPI based ones, lots of vegan and vegetarian ones. If you're going for something like that, make sure it's at least a mixture of something like pea and brown rice so you're getting complete protein. Hemp's a really good one to have in there as well. Many that can be used sort of in savoury dishes because they don't have much taste or texture, so things like a unflavoured collagen. So depending on your preferences and how you want to have it, there's so many different ones that can be useful. Obviously a really great thing to have if you're struggling with solid foods and textures of animal products, as drinking them can be a bit more tolerable. Pancare is such a incredibly supportive resource for you all, and really, really, you're all here, so I don't need to tell you, it's probably preaching to the choir, but utilise your wonderful support workers at Pancare. You can also access an oncology dietitian, either, suss out if there's one available to you at your treatment centre, or you can speak to your GP and get a care plan, chronic disease management plan from your GP, which will offer you a bit of a Medicare rebate on sessions if that helps make it more accessible for you. The World Cancer Research Fund actually recommends that everyone with a cancer diagnosis see a dietitian throughout their treatment and afterwards. And here's our details. If you want to get in touch with myself, my email is there, Naomi.Lawrance, or the phone numbers, or jump onto our website and you'll be able to find us that way as well.